The candles on Marco's birthday cake were still smoking when my mother rescheduled a flight to Tuscany on my credit card. I watched her from across the room, pearls at her throat, phone pressed to her ear, one finger raised at the party planner like she was conducting a symphony. 27-year-olds were destroying the venue behind her. My son was smearing blue frosting across his cheek, laughing that laugh of his, the kind that starts somewhere deep in his chest before it ever reaches his face. And Carmela Russo was negotiating a first-class upgrade on a trip she didn't know I was paying for. I smiled and cut the cake. That's what nobody understood about me. I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I had simply learned, over 34 years of being Carmela's daughter, that some people are weather. You don't argue with weather. You dress for it. My name is Valentina Russo. I grew up in Atlanta in a house that looked richer than it was, with a mother who performed happiness like a second job and a brother who performed success like a third one. I am a forensic accountant. I find truth inside numbers when people work very hard to hide it. The irony is not subtle. I can trace a ghost transaction across 14 shell accounts before my coffee goes cold. But for 9 years, I couldn't see what was happening inside my own family's ledger. Or maybe I could. Maybe I just didn't want to. I was 25 when I first noticed the cracks. Fresh out of graduate school, first real salary hitting my account like a small miracle every 2 weeks, living in a studio apartment in Midtown Atlanta, eating pasta 4 nights a week, feeling more in control than I ever had, growing up in that beautiful, financially unstable house in Buckhead. My father, Dominic, called on a Tuesday night. That alone was unusual. Dominic didn't call. Dominic existed in the peripheral vision of every room, charming at dinner parties, invisible at breakfast. When his name lit up my phone, I felt the specific dread of someone who already knew the call had a price tag on it. "Valentina," he said, "your mother and I need to talk to you about something serious." The mortgage was 4 months behind, the car payments 2 months. Raphael, 28 years old and between his third and fourth failed business, had borrowed money he couldn't return. They were, in my father's careful phrasing, in a temporary situation. "How much?" I asked. "Enough that it shouldn't have been my problem. Enough that I gave it to them anyway." I told myself it was a bridge, one payment, but temporary has a way of becoming permanent when nobody is held accountable for the inconvenience. A month later, they needed help with utilities. 2 months after, Raphael's DUI legal fees arrived like an uninvited house guest. Then the car insurance lapsed. Then my mother decided the kitchen needed renovating because a neighbor had renovated theirs. And Carmela Russo was not about to be outdone by a woman whose maiden name she considered inferior. Each request came dressed in the same language. "Just this once, until we get back on our feet. You know how much we've sacrificed for you." So, at 26, I did what forensic accountants do. I built a system. I created a financial management structure my family believed was administered by an independent advisor named Mr. Holt. A letter on professional letterhead, an anonymous benefactor, they assumed a distant relative of my father's, had arranged for all household expenses to be managed going forward: mortgage, utilities, car notes, quarterly allowances, everything flowing cleanly and invisibly through accounts they couldn't access but benefited from entirely. Mr. Holt didn't exist. He was me. My salary, my bonuses, my carefully rationed savings, my future quietly converted into their present. I did it because I understood my family's psychology as precisely as I understood balance sheets. If they knew the money came from me, quiet, bookish, never quite enough Valentina, they would resent it. My mother would refrain generosity as something she was owed. Raphael would spend 20 minutes explaining why he deserved it more. So I became invisible. I chose it. For 9 years, I watched my mother take trips and call Raphael to thank him for being a good son. I watched my father buy a new watch and assume Mr. Holt had sent a bonus. I watched Raphael wear credit for a generosity that had never once come from him, like a tailored suit he hadn't paid for. What kept me going was Marco, my son, who arrived at 29 via a relationship that was wonderful and temporary in the way some people just are. Marco, with his dark eyes and his bottomless laugh, and his complete certainty that I was the greatest person alive. He was enough. He was more than enough. But 6 months before his 7th birthday, I noticed something. A withdrawal, small, obscure, routed through one of the accounts in a way that was almost too clean. I flagged it mentally. I was busy. I would look into it. I didn't look into it. 3 weeks after Marco's birthday, I sat in Dr. Whitfield's office on the 14th floor of Piedmont Atlanta Hospital and looked at a scan instead. Chapter 1 ends the only way it honestly could. Not with a confrontation, not with a revelation. With a word I had spent my whole life being too competent to expect. Cancer. I want to tell you I cried in Dr. Whitfield's office. I didn't. I took notes. Stage 2 breast cancer, caught early enough to matter, serious enough that the word early felt like a courtesy. Surgery was non-optional. Chemotherapy, probable. He spoke with the careful cadence of a man who had delivered this sentence hundreds of times and still believed in the weight of each word. I appreciated that about him. I wrote down every medical term he used and looked each one up in the car before I started the engine. Then I drove home. Made Marco dinner, read him 2 chapters of his book, tucked him in, and sat down at my kitchen table with a glass of water and my laptop. I called my mother first, because I believed in whatever small chamber of hope I hadn't yet closed off, that crisis has a way of clarifying people, that maybe the word cancer would cut through the pearls and the performance and find something real in Carmela Russo. Valentina, she said, before I'd finished my second sentence. Do you know what week this is? Raphael's engagement party is in 3 weeks. If you lose your hair during treatment, I need to know now so we can plan around it for the photos. I held the phone very still. She cried after that, genuinely, I think. But the crying was the kind that happens when someone realizes a situation is going to be inconvenient for them. She mentioned the Tuscany trip twice, said she'd light a candle at church, did not offer to come over. My father said he would pray. His voice cracked slightly. He did not come over either. Raphael's call lasted 4 minutes. He asked, with the self-preservation instinct of someone who has always been the favorite, whether breast cancer ran in families, whether he should be concerned, whether he should tell his fiancée, Elena. I had heard the name Elena twice before, a woman he'd met at a conference in Houston. Quiet, not what anyone expected from Raphael, who collected loud, decorative people the way our mother collected pearl necklaces. Lucia arrived at my door 40 minutes later. I had not called her. She had called Dr. Whitfield's office herself. She was listed as my emergency contact. She showed up with groceries, a printed research summary on stage 2 outcomes, a calendar already blocked into treatment windows, and the expression of someone who had decided on your behalf that falling apart was not currently on the schedule. She stayed the night, slept on my couch, left her shoes by the door like she lived there, which she practically did in every way that mattered. It was Lucia, around midnight over dark chocolate at the kitchen table, who pushed me back to the laptop. Val, you should get your finances in order before treatment starts. You know how medical billing works. You need everything clean and accessible. She meant it practically. She had no idea what she was unlocking. I pulled up the account management system I had maintained for 9 years, every transfer logged with the precision of someone who did this professionally. Immaculate record-keeping. And there, threaded through the immaculate records like a hairline fracture in a cathedral wall, was the thing I had flagged 6 months ago and never gone back to examine. I went back to it now. Forensic accounting is not dramatic the way people imagine. It is not a single eureka moment. It is hours of cross-referencing transaction IDs, routing numbers, institutional codes, building a map that starts as noise and slowly, agonizingly, becomes a picture. By 2 in the morning, I had a picture. Someone had accessed accounts in my name, not the family accounts tied to my personal credit, lines of credit I had no memory of opening, a second mortgage instrument attached to a property I co-owned with my parents, a series of transfers bearing my digital signature on documentation I never seen. My signature on documents I did not sign. Across 3 years, 11 accounts. The figure was precise and devastating. $287,000. I sat back in my chair. Lucia asleep on the couch, Marco asleep down the hall, the house completely quiet, and I, a woman diagnosed with cancer 12 hours ago, was staring at evidence that someone had systematically dismantled her financial identity while she was busy keeping everyone else's life functional. I followed the structure to its origin at 3:47 in the morning. A power of attorney, signed apparently by me during what my records described as routine estate planning. A meeting I vaguely remembered. My mother had called it housekeeping. A notary had been present. I had signed several documents without reading them closely because my mother was sitting across the table, and I had spent 34 years not questioning her in rooms where she controlled the atmosphere. The power of attorney traced back through 3 subsidiary layers to a registered federal contractor. I searched the registered agent's name, Valentina Russo, Raphael's fiancée. I closed the laptop, opened it, closed it again. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. They were completely still on the table, while my entire understanding of the last 3 years rearranged itself into something I didn't yet have language for. Valentina Russo was not a woman Raphael met at a conference. Valentina Russo was a federal forensic fraud investigator. The question that kept my eyes open until sunrise was not the one you'd expect. Not, what has she done to me, but what has she been trying to stop? Valentina Russo chose a coffee shop in Midtown for our meeting. Small, unremarkable, the kind of place that doesn't remember faces. She was already seated when I arrived. No Raphael, no family, just a woman in a gray blazer with a federal contractor badge face down on the table, and eyes that had already decided to tell me everything. She didn't apologize for the ambush of it. I respected that immediately. She slid a folder across the table before I sat down completely. "Valentina," she said, "every dollar we moved is accounted for. Every cent is sitting in a secured federal holding account with your name as sole beneficiary. We didn't take from you, we were keeping it from them." I opened the folder. 43 pages. I read the summary in 4 minutes. Raphael and my mother, Carmela, had been running a coordinated fraud scheme for 6 years, leveraging my professional reputation, my credit infrastructure, and the financial management system I had built in secret, the one I thought was invisible, as the backbone of their operation. False loan applications in my name, inflated insurance claims routed through my accounts, a property scheme using my co-ownership stake as collateral for loans neither of them intended to repay. They had not stumbled into my financial architecture accidentally, they had studied it. And Carmela, my mother, had watched me build Mr. Holt from the beginning and said nothing, because she understood before I did that it was useful to her. My mother had known it was me the entire time. The room didn't spin. There was no dramatic collapse. I am a forensic accountant. I have sat across from embezzlers, fraudsters, people who looked like grandparents and stole from charities. I know what financial betrayal looks like on paper. I had just never seen my own name in the victim column before. Elena explained the power of attorney carefully. My mother had guided me to sign it during that notary meeting, buried inside estate documents, authorizing an entity Elena controlled to access and secure assets when investigative triggers were met. It was, Elena said quietly, the most ethically complicated instrument she had used in 15 years of federal work. She had needed my signature to protect me without alerting the people monitoring my accounts. She had hated that she couldn't tell me. "Why Raphael?" I asked. "Why the engagement?" She met my eyes without flinching. "I'm not engaged to him. It was a cover to document the full scope of the scheme. Raphael believes I love him. That's the part of this job I'll never entirely make peace with." I looked at her for a long moment. "You're the only person in this entire story," I said, "who did something hard to protect someone they'd never met." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The case closed 5 weeks later. Raphael accepted a plea. Carmela cooperated, negotiating reduced charges with the survival instinct of a woman who had spent a lifetime redirecting consequences toward the nearest available surface. My funds were returned in full. The interest accrued during federal holding added $62,000 to the total. I did not attend the sentencing. I was in pre-op at Piedmont, Atlanta, in a hospital gown, with Lucia holding one hand and a crayon drawing Marco had made tucked inside the other. He had drawn us standing in front of a house with a red door. Written at the bottom in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Me and Mama home." I held it until the anesthesia found me. I woke up to flowers on the table, not from Carmela, not from Raphael, from Elena, who had left a card that said simply, "You held everything up for people who were quietly burning it down. You're still standing. That is the most impressive thing I have ever documented." I laughed out loud in that recovery room, alone, post-surgery, slightly medicated, and laughed until my eyes went wet. Lucia said it was the anesthesia. I knew better. Recovery took 6 months. Chemotherapy was 4 rounds, brutal and clarifying, and the way only things that temporarily take everything from you can be. I lost my hair in week 3. I wore it like a statement. Marco told me I looked like a superhero. I believed him completely. I sold my stake in the Buckhead property and bought a small house in Decatur with a red front door. Marco and I painted it on a Saturday in October, both of us covered in red, laughing at nothing in particular. It was the best day I can remember. I never spoke to Carmela or Dominic again. I sent my father one letter, not asking for anything, not explaining anything, just telling him I hoped he found the courage, before he ran out of time, to be more than the man who let things happen. I don't know if he read it. Elena and I meet for coffee every few weeks now. She left federal work 6 months after the case closed, said some things permanently change your relationship with the job. We don't talk about Raphael. We talk about everything else, which turns out to be a lot. I am not who I was before all of this. I am considerably less patient, significantly more selective, and genuinely, sustainably happy in a way I don't think I ever was when I was holding everyone else up. The name on the check used to be my burden. Now it's just my name, and I've decided that's everything. Thank you guys for watching. Before you go, I have one question for you, and I genuinely want to know. If you were Valentina, at which point would you have walked away? The first phone call asking for money, the kitchen renovation, or would you have held on just like she did? Drop it in the comments. No wrong answers. And while you're there, tell me where in the world you're listening from, because this community is spread across places that would surprise you. If this story hit differently today, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to this channel. Let's just say somebody's secret had a 20-year expiry date. See you in my next story.